My mom, she always said I was determined, but other people would say I was a nightmare, like as a kid. And when I found skateboarding, I found a way to focus that determination, and that was a huge bonus to my parents because they were like, finally, he's not taking his energy out on us. I was relentless in trying to get what I wanted as a kid, and that shifted to skateboarding and wanting to learn tricks, and that was it. It wasn't until I went to the skate park for the first time that I was truly hooked, and I felt compelled to try to learn what I saw, because I saw people literally flying out of swimming pools, and I was like, I want to fly, I want to do that, whatever it takes, I'm doing that. The skate park was electric. It was just this hub of excitement and creativity, and you knew that if you went, you would find a crew or you'd find a session that you really wanted to participate in. When my dad would drive me to the skate park, I would put my pads on in the car so that when we arrived, I would just bust out of the door ready to skate. That's how excited I was to go there. My introduction to skating transition was skating pools because that was the only type of transition at the time. There weren't half pipes, and street skating was not a thing. It was more just for transportation. And so when I actually did a little aerial, I felt very accomplished. Rock and rolls was sort of the next level because that's when you start hitting the coping and you're hitting it with your board, and it's super scary because suddenly you're at the top of the pool. One time I was at the park, I did not lift up my wheels enough and hung them up on the coping and ended up knocked out with my teeth gone, unconscious on the bottom of the pool. And that was my first big injury. I feel like when I first got hurt and I had this concussion, knocked my teeth out, I was 10 years old. That was a turning point in my life because I literally woke up as the ambulance arrived, and I was in a totally different place. And my first thought was, what happened? They found you at the bottom of the pool. And I thought, oh, I hung up on a rock and roll. I got to figure out how to lift my board up higher and maneuver my feet better. That was my first thought. Not like, oh my God, what have I done? I'm never skating again. Where are my teeth? It was more like, I knew I was getting back out there. And I feel like that was a defining moment of my career where it was like, I didn't mind getting hurt for the sake of progression. That was when I knew that I was gonna keep skating for a long time. Skateboarding was my creative outlet. It was my way of, that was my voice. When I really dove into skating, I found a way to create new things. I found a community of people that came from all different walks of life, but we shared this common interest, and that held us so strongly that I didn't even see differences. And I think that was awesome. I mean, we were like this band of misfits, and we didn't fit in anywhere, but the skate park was our home away from home. And we all spoke the same language. We all were pushing each other to be creative and to learn new things. And I felt like that community really defined me. And it was really different. It was a different type of music, different type of fashion, a different attitude towards life, and one that didn't follow all the rules, so to speak. And I loved it. And I remember going to school and trying to explain to some of my classmates that I used to hang out with when I was a kid about this type of music, and they were just like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not listening to Foreigner? School was, school was not a pleasant experience. I was really small, so I got picked on a lot, and now we know that as bullying. But back then, you just sucked it up, and you dealt with it, or you just ghosted through the hallways. And I feel like I did a lot of that through high school, because I was very skinny for my age. I was pretty nerdy. Like I excelled in school. I was in the advanced courses. And so, I was already marked as like a nerdy kid, but I was scrawny. And then it was just like, all right, so, 90-pound weakling. And then I skated. And that was the trifecta of uncool, really. Like skating was the least cool thing you could do, especially in the early 80s. It was more like, why haven't you grown out of that? I mean, skateboarding was like the yo-yo, like get over it. And it was at the time when I started really excelling at it, and when I started hitting a stride of being creative and doing well in competition. And then I'd go to school and it was like, what are you doing with your life? And so it was very isolating. And I basically learned to go to school kind of undetected, get to my classes, and bounce. I'd say early on, my style was very focused on tricks. And so a lot of people thought that wasn't a style. I had no style. I was a robot. They would literally call me like a circus skater because I just did tricks. And that was more because I didn't have the background. I didn't have the surf influence. I didn't come from Dogtown. I wasn't in my late teens, you know, and so between my size and my focus, I just started doing tricks. And at some point, it was hard because I was in this very small community of skateboarding that was already isolated and outcast and weird. And then I'm a type of skater that's only doing tricks, and that made me an outcast in this outcast activity, and I was just extremely isolated in that. I want to be at least accepted by this community that I love. And I just kept trying and eventually sort of made waves in that sense because I created this new style of skating that was more trick-based, but also more aerial-based because I was the first one to actually ollie into my aerials. I didn't think I was creating a revolution. I was just trying to figure out how to get in the air because I was so small, I couldn't do it with my bulk. And so in order to ollie and then grab your board late, that allowed me to get the air time that these bigger guys were getting. And suddenly I was going 4 or 5 feet out of these pools as a 12-year-old. And that was, to me, that was the solution. And I got made fun of a lot for it. Like I literally they would write about me in Thrasher magazine after I won an event and they're like, Tony Hawk, the king of no style, cheats his airs because he ollies into them and then he can grab it any way. And I'm like, what is wrong with that? I didn't get it. I didn't know why there was such a backlash. I think my size and style became an asset through those years because I was skinny, but I was also very flexible. And suddenly I found that I could do these tweaks and these moves in the air that no one else could really do because for one, they didn't know how to get in the air, and for the other, they didn't have the kind of body style that I had where I could do these not flailing, but definitely very flexible moves in the air, like doing big spins and tweaking certain things and doing even just down to a basic hand plant. I could twist my hand plant and contort it in ways that no one else could. And people took notice of that. I wanted validation from the skate community, but at the same time, I loved skating too much to make that the only focus of what I was doing. But at some point, I learned how to do these moves high in the air, and I learned how to do them on different terrain, and that is kind of when the haters shut up. That was when I think I won an event at Upland. Upland was widely considered the gnarliest pool, and at some point, it was like, well, Tony won the Upland event. We can't really talk shit about him anymore. I was 14 years old when I went pro. I rose through the pro ranks pretty quickly. So within the first year, I'd actually won a couple events. And around the same time, so I'm like 15, 16, around the same time, skating started to experience this new wave of popularity where kids were starting to get into it again because they saw that skateboarding wasn't just this flatland dance routine anymore. It was suddenly people were doing aerials and people were flying out of swimming pools. And I mean, 1984, the McTwist was invented. You know, people started doing literally somersaults out of these pools and other people, outsiders started to take notice. That's when I realized that skateboarding was something much bigger than I ever imagined. And I was actually making money as a 16-year-old, like decent money. And going to school, I just lived this strange polarized life because I would go to Florida and there would be fans, and I'd be signing autographs and I would win prize money. And I'd come home and I was still a ghost in the hallways. And at some point, there was a shift, especially around my junior or senior year, where people knew that Tony Hawk went to their school and he was a pro skater, but no one could pick me out in the hallway. It wouldn't happen.